Throughout its history, Shonen Jump has continued to evolve as a manga magazine. It started humbly in the late 60s, gradually rose to prominence through cutthroat cancellations and a trailblazing attitude. But come the 80s, it would explode in popularity, with hit after hit series finding their home in Jump, the magazine then innovating and helping to evolve different genres or styles. If you've been following along with these videos, you'll also know that I've referred to the last few years, 1995 and 1996, as Shonen Jump's Dark Age, a period where magazine circulation dipped due to an exodus of hit series from the magazine, most notably Dragon Ball and Slam Dunk. While it would take some time to regain the spot of best-selling manga magazine, 1997 would see a particular series debut which would change the face of Jump and manga as we know it forever. Before we get to it though, there's plenty of other series that debuted throughout the year to look at, so let's dive headfirst into Shonen Jump in the year 1997. To kick off the year, let's check out some smaller works from a beloved author we haven't seen for a little bit, Akira Toriyama. 1997 would see him return, with the year being bookended by two small series at the very beginning and end. The first of these short series is Tokimecha, lasting just 3 chapters, which honestly is just a one-shot split into 3 short chapters, which makes its relative obscurity make much more sense. It's only about 45 pages total. It's a fun little story though of a girl building a time machine, going back to the past, meeting a cave boy called Mu, and then classic silly Toriyama shenanigans ensue, complete with robots and dinosaurs. There were one-shots published during and post Dragon Ball's run, but this got the cover and seemed to spark a bit of a return for the author within the magazine, which I'm sure editorial were happy with. Sadly, Tokimecha hasn't seen the wider release that the Toriyama manga has had, with there being no official way to read it in English, and I'm unsure if it was ever bundled in with any other one-shot collections anywhere else either. I'm sure this is by virtue of it being quite short, and his future works in Jump would have much more eyes on them, like the next manga we're going to look at, which debuted at the tail end of 1997. Skipping to the end of the year briefly, COWA would last 14 chapters and would have enough pages for a whole volume, and this is something you can read in English both physically and through online platforms like the Shonen Jump app. I'm not sure if this is true of Tokimecha, but COWA also marks Toriyama stepping into the foray of digital art, which makes sense as a considerable portion of the series has been coloured. I feel this is also reflected in how COWA has been drawn. The designs are cute and stripped back, but don't take me calling them simple detract from how good they are. I feel Toriyama is a master of drawing so many things, and included is simpler gag-based stuff. He did start out with Dr. Slump after all. COWA's simplicity also extends to its cast of monster children. They see the world in a very naive and fun way, which makes the art quite fitting. There is a twist to all of this though, because we follow little monsters, so their perceptions on what's cool or scary is flipped. Angels, kisses, and pretty things, these are what scare them, and conversely, more gross and horror adjacent stuff is their jam. COWA is a work full of great comedy from Toriyama. His slapstick is great here, especially considering the kids are paired up with this middle-aged human man to bounce off of, a hallmark of Toriyama's later work. I definitely recommend checking this out. It's a nice, short, cozy read that will surely make you laugh. I've even talked about it once before in this video on older vampire manga, so watch that too if you'd like some more vampire manga recommendations. Keeping things a bit spooky and continuing on from 1996, Yu-Gi-Oh! Would keep introducing more games, more characters, and interweave its Millennium elements into the story more, delving into the being who's possessing Yu-Gi and others who possess Millennium items. Early on in the year, starting with the chapter The Man from Egypt, Shadi would be introduced, possessing not only the Millennium Rod but the Millennium Scales as well. His introduction brings with it a greater focus on Yu-Gi-Oh's fascination with ancient Egypt and its culture, giving some background on the Egyptian pantheon of gods and certain bits of lore. With this, archaeology is touched on too, since the Millennium items had to be unearthed from somewhere. The scene where Shadi is in tears seeing his culture be put on display is pretty interesting too, and I feel like Takahashi takes great care in representing Egyptian heritage, while also worming in a commentary about how others perceive and treat it. Yu-Gi-Oh! Has always cast judgment on people who take advantage of others, especially the greedy, so it's nice to see that it bolsters this element through its setting and what it chooses to explore outside of the game battle shonen parts. A central focus of this arc is Shadi judging people too, with his scales and observing their souls with his rod, casting parallels to ancient Egyptian tapestries where the heart of the deceased is weighed against the statue of Ma'at in a process of judgment. Shadi wants to weigh Yugi's soul to figure out the power of the Millennium Puzzle, revealing that these items were made initially to ward off thieves who would defile the ancient pharaoh's tombs. Yugi possesses 2 doors of the soul though when Shadi goes to investigate him. One of the doors is of his own soul and the other is of his dark self, complete with a huge maze. I love this imagery. It's playful, it's a game which suits Yugi, but it's also complicated and obfuscating like Yami as well as Yugi. It's like he's hiding parts of himself. We might as well talk about the Yami-Yugi split here too, since these aspects are explored a lot more in 1997. We come to learn later that the Yami portion of Yugi is the Pharaoh Atem, but partially at least I think there is some of Yugi in there too, since the idea shares its basis in the shadow self, likely borrowed from Jungian psychological theory. So I often view Yugi and Yami as both different characters but also one and the same, with Yami often acting in a metaphorical way. He is Yugi's darker parts, his tenacity, his aggression, willingness to cheat and fight back, but also sometimes his confidence and all the emotion he holds back. Friendship is a core idea that Yu-Gi-Oh! Loves to explore, which we'll delve into throughout the whole series, but alongside Yugi's developing friendship with others, he also develops one with himself through Yami. This can be seen throughout the year, as the arc with Shadi sees Yugi come to terms with the fact that he has another self, and ultimately, through some other arcs he learns to put his trust in Yami, which is also him trusting and believing in himself. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is as much a story about a boy playing games and making friends as it is of a boy who learns to love and believe in himself, I think. It's a long journey, but the seeds are wonderfully spread throughout this arc, with Yugi learning to trust and value himself through the support and friends he's made. This idea also thrives through simple imagery like the concept of puzzles. Yu-Gi-Oh! Often preaches about friendship and unity, and what is a puzzle if not made whole by combining a lot of smaller different pieces. It's such a simple idea, but one I found incredibly moving with how Yami presented it in his speech against Shadi here. He also looks so cool striking a pose alongside his friends when standing up to him. If you can't tell on this reread, I absolutely fell in love with this arc, and I highly recommend checking it out again if you've forgotten about it. In between slightly bigger arcs, we do get some Game of the Week style chapters too, which early Yu-Gi-Oh! Is well known for. There's plenty of nostalgia and creativity at play here, which makes these a joy to read. We have digital pets, a focus on American comics with Zombira, these Rock'em Sock'em boxing monster toys, and even yo-yos. Heck yeah, look at Joey go! While these shorter stories that would focus on individual games would get rarer in the future, they are a blast and important to acknowledge, I think, since these are Yu-Gi-Oh's roots. There's a lot to love about them. They really encapsulate the time period of the late 90s and what kind of games or toys people had, which I think is neat. Plus, it's a massive outlet for Kazuki Takahashi's creativity too. On a character front, these shorter stories are also great at building character dynamics, so by the time the cast is grouped up for a bigger arc, they already feel like good friends, and the battles they fight with or for each other hit even harder. Yugi and Joey especially shine in this vein, with multiple stories building on their friendship. I especially like this panel here where Yugi remarks that Joey's problems are his problems. It's super sweet. Back to the bigger arcs, I think the most discussed one from early Yu-Gi-Oh! Has to be Death Tea, and I fully understand why. Prior to it, we're introduced to capsule monsters and Mokuba Kaiba, which leads into the reintroduction of Seto Kaiba, who has made an entire theme park pretty much to just get revenge for Yuki beating him at Duel Monsters a dozen or so chapters earlier. His pettiness knows no bounds, and Takahashi builds on him, focusing on his rich boy origins through his backstory, making him a compelling and fun antagonist. A large chunk of the arc sees Yugi and Ko go through various death games, but somehow they make it through, eventually building up to the climax where Yugi faces Kaiba in another game of Duel Monsters. This and the first Duel Monster game combined pretty much act as the first episode for the Gallop anime series, which most people are familiar with, as here the game is fleshed out a bit more and the famous Exodia is fully revealed. Looping back to the puzzle imagery earlier, here is Takahashi using that by integrating it into one of his games. The only way Yugi can win is by the power of unity, both with his friends and with the 5 pieces of Exodia. It's some excellent, simple writing. Based on this arc, it's easy to see how fans latched onto Kaiba and Duel Monsters. It's one of the more interesting games with fleshed out rules, cool monster designs, and then you have Kaiba, who among all of Yu-Gi-Oh's early creepy kids, sticks out as one of its best. He is an unapologetic, delightful bastard. As much as I love Death Tea though, the final arc of the year, Millennium Enemy, might be my favourite, introducing us to another fan favourite character in Ryo Bakura. Here the crew makes a new friend and engage in a game called Monster World, which is part board game and part tabletop role-playing game like Dungeons & Dragons. It features an elaborate board with switchable tiles, little miniatures, and plenty of 10-sided dice. It's very fun seeing the cast play D&D together effectively, and how that morphs into a shadow game where they all put their trust into Yami Yugi, including Yugi himself, as they're trapped in the game alongside all their friends. This might be early Yu-Gi-Oh! At its most brilliant, mixing friendship, getting stuck into the very games Yugi adores with mystical powers, and having Millennium Item showdowns against some of the best antagonists to ever grace manga. Bakura, like Shadi from earlier, is the possessor of another Millennium Item. This time it's the Millennium Ring, which allows its user to move souls into objects. Furthermore, like Yugi, there's another soul residing in this item which swaps with Bakura, so we have some cool parallels between Yugi and Bakura. Bakura, like Yugi, wants friends, but his dark counterpart makes that impossible, making him quite the tragic and lonely character. The cast working with him to defeat his shadow self makes for a great little narrative to go alongside the dice rolling that fills this arc though. It's such an exciting concept when it's first introduced too, especially since the year has been so focused on delving into what and who Yugi's other self is. Having another character go through something similar gives us a different perspective on these Millennium Items and alternate selves. Accompanying this arc and the ideas of friendship and trust is also the push by Yugi to never leave any of his friends behind. This includes the little monster he befriends in the game and Bakura. There is this darkness to the series. Its games are often rooted in ancient evils, and its pages are filled with greedy and exploitative characters, but all of this just serves to make Yugi shine even brighter. The lessons Yu-Gi-Oh! Teaches often sound quite childish, but they are things I think we should all internalize and keep reminding ourselves of, to be kind, to take care of our friends, and to believe in ourselves. So, with the core of Yu-Gi-Oh! Formed, a large part of its characters now defined, we also have its art style, which has slowly become more uniform over time, with everyone becoming more angular. I do miss the creepy cute dichotomy the series originally had, where the characters looked a lot more off, but some of these shots of Yami Yugi feel very classic later on in 1997. They're sleek and they hype me up for what's to come, as starting in 1998, Yu-Gi-Oh! Would go into full Duel Monsters mode. That is a discussion best saved for the next history video though, so for now we'll watch Yu-Gi-Oh! Chug along as it grows in popularity within the magazine, and move on to some newer series from 1997 which you might be less familiar with. Watashi no Kaeru-sama, or My Sir Frog, would last 14 chapters and 2 volumes by Yuki Kawashima, Contrary to its super cute cover, this would be a full-on science fiction work, following a frog-like robot in a world where humanity is in hiding as robots have rebelled and almost all of them have been wiped clean off the map. In its run, it tackled ideas pertaining to how people view robots and likely how we define humanity as robot sci-fi tends to do. Like in the first chapter, we see a girl whose family was killed off by robots, but she still warms up to this froggy friend. Frog-kun also seems to possess a human heart, and so he fights off robots attacking humans, and when equipped with a sword he transforms slightly, becoming a lot more angular. It's an interesting concept, a wandering frog warrior in this post-apocalypse world, and from my understanding it really tried to vary what ideas it was tackling in its short run, showing off both humans and robots in positive and negative lights. There was mentions of a human being wanting revenge for losing an arm, as well as a psychopathic robot that believes they could become human if they killed one. It's a shame this one didn't last very long, and it's something I would totally love to see get a translation someday because it seems like a cool little manga. Our next manga would be the first big hit that would debut in 1997, Hanasaka Tenshi Tenten-Kun, a gag series by Kazumata Ogiri lasting 162 chapters and 17 volumes. Tenten-Kun is an angel who has been sent down from heaven to guide elementary schooler Hideyuki Sakura with finding his talent since God made him talentless at birth through a slip-up caused by Tenten. Of course, this leads to a Doraemon-style silly gag manga complete with magical angel and devil items, where Tenten and Hideyuki go around getting involved in all sorts of mischief because Tenten isn't exactly the paragon of virtue he should be, although he always does try his best to help. This series would run for 3 years up until the turn of the millennium, and during that time it would receive a 43-episode anime adaptation by Nippon Animation, as well as a game for the Game Boy Color titled Hanasaka Tenshi Tenten-Kun Beat Break, with it being a rhythmic puzzle game. I don't think Tenten is especially well known outside of Japan, but it served as a gag pillar of Jump for a time, and its creator Kazumata Ogiri is still creating new manga for Shonen Jump, having had a prolific career in children's gag manga. Butsu Zone would see the debut of Hiroyuki Takei in Jump, and while a future series of Takei would last much longer, this one would only last 19 chapters and 3 volumes total. It follows Senju, an emissary sent down from the Butsu Zone by the Bodhisattva Kanon to escort a young girl to India who is the reincarnation of Meiryotei, the supposed savior of humanity. It's a work steeped in Buddhist faith and intertwines wordy dialogue and explanations of various Buddhist lore with your usual banal shonen elements you'd expect from Jump. This is an odd combination, and while it does stumble a lot, it's very interesting, both through it adapting elements of religion into a shonen manga, but also through the intersection of your classic optimistic shonen protagonist with the beliefs and teachings of Buddhism. There's an almost conversational element to how it tackles certain ideas regarding conflict. The question, can you put love and kindness above all else, even in the most harrowing of circumstances, does come up, and it makes sense for it to appear. It would have been nice to see it answered with more time at its disposal though. There's a lot of charm to Butsu Zone in its art, philosophy, and its journey aspects. It has a full fan translation should you want to read it, and for fans of Takei's later hit Shaman King, a certain character will be very familiar to you, which I think is pretty neat. Returning to an established author once again, 1997 would see Masakazu Katsura return after a few duds in Jump with arguably his most famous work, Eyes, which would run for 143 chapters and 15 volumes. In comparison to Shadow Lady, DNA Squared, and Video Girl I, this series would tone down any science fiction elements and opt to be a pretty standard romance drama. Eyes follows multiple characters whose names start with I, the protagonist Ichitaka and his 2 love interests Iori and Itsuki, with a 3rd and 4th character joining the cast later on, Izumi and Aiko. Initially, Ichitaka crushes on Iori, who is a model, and juggles getting to know her with his relationship with his childhood friend Itsuki, who has this insanely indulgent job of making movie-grade props, and with how much detail has gone into this little side thing, it's easy to see where Katsura's passions actually lie. Something I always enjoy about his work is just seeing all of the little things he crams in which are personal to him. It is mostly stripped down, however, compared to past works by him. Maybe it's because I've read a number of Katsura's works prior, but Eyes feels very safe. There's no science fiction weirdness, there's a bunch of common shonen romance tropes like misunderstandings, people being late, the main character not being able to decide between multiple girls. It just didn't hit the same to me as Video Girl Eye. The emotional elements never quite landed as hard, and there's a lack of depth or exploration into other ideas that would be present in Katsura's other works. That's not to say I think Eyes is bad though, it's extremely robust, it hits all the romance and drama elements it needs to really, it doesn't overstay its welcome too much either, and its sidecasts are pretty likable and fun, with it even having a gay character who's treated very positively, minor stereotyping aside. And since this is by Masakazu Katsura, the art is phenomenal. His characters are always pretty, his expressions are rich, and he knows how to lay out a page in a satisfying way. I'm not the biggest fan of his covers for Eyes though. They're technically really brilliant. They're detailed, the colors pop in satisfying ways, but there's a certain uncanniness to his hyper-realistic art that I've never been able to shake. After this series, Katsura would move on from Jump, branching out into other ventures that seemed more catered to his interests. From my understanding, Eyes was partially done out of obligation to cater to a specific demographic or genre without much of his more out there ideas, so him banging out one more well-regarded hit in this area despite him having interests in other things is super admirable. It may sound as if I'm being a bit harsh or dismissive of Eyes, and that might be my Video Girl Eye fan brain running in overdrive, but Eyes is good, and if you're hankering for an older rom-com ecchi drama, it's worth checking out. Its popularity at the time too would lead to it getting a novelization with an original story, a PS2 dating sim/visual novel game, and later on some anime OVAs, adding to about 8 total episodes, running from 2002 to 2006. It has also remained in the public conscious too, since in 2018 it received a TV live-action adaptation which ran for 13 episodes. Eyes hasn't been neglected outside of Japan either, as it has a full English physical release, much like Video Girl Eye, and is available in an official capacity digitally as well. Another returning mangaka wouldn't get so lucky, with Masaya Tokihiro, creator of Jungle King Ta-chan, serializing Wrestling with Momoko this year, running for just 18 chapters and 2 volumes. The title is pretty self-explanatory. It's a wrestling manga following the main character Momoko, who ends up setting up a wrestling club in school and trains with a bunch of boys, which leads to a ton of ecchi gags which were Masaya Tokihiro's speciality. Alongside this, the series did see the character and wrestling growth of its cast as they practiced more and more, as it tried to be more of your traditional sports series as well. There's a genuineness to how Tokihiro depicts his characters interacting, and I think that comes across in his artwork. Characters can be goofy, but there's also an earnestness to their smiles and attitude. Unfortunately, it was likely that Masaya Tokihiro's style of storytelling and perhaps ecchi elements had fallen out of style over time, as this would be the last manga he would make within Jump. It was bound to happen eventually, especially with the then editor-in-chief Torishima's push for newer artists to debut over veterans, so his presence in future videos will be missed. Merry Wind by Junji Yamamoto would be a baseball manga lasting just 11 chapters and 2 volumes that focused on juggling drama elements with its sport. It would see Kazuma Yamakawa enrolled in a new school, one with a weak team, in order to raise it up to beat his rival Yuji Tsukamoto. But when Kazuma finds out about his rival's death, his resolve regarding baseball falters, leading to the aforementioned drama elements. Throughout its short run, hardly any baseball was actually played, and the way it laid everything out is said to be confusing in some places, since it hides the reveal about Kazuma's rival for several chapters. In the end, it wouldn't make much of a mark in Jump, likely since it was toying with a similar setup that had been played out for over a decade, leading it to be one of many short-lived sports series that filled the magazine. Joker by Kazutoshi Yamane would be his second and last manga in Jump, sadly ending just after 15 chapters and 2 volumes. Why I find this such a shame is how cool Yamane's stories are, with this one being about a pro wrestler who mutates and dons a mask, becoming Joker, the clown of justice who fights other evil mutated wrestlers who plan to take over the world. Pro wrestling, I find, is such a ripe sport and medium for manga to specifically merge with, since it has the capacity to harbour all these long-running stories between the wrestlers, as well as showing the behind the scenes of a given venue. Joker also followed a heel wrestler, giving it more of an anti-hero protagonist, but perhaps it's because of that combined with taking things in a battle direction and having more of an American comics influence that led to it not clicking much with Jump's audience at the time. Yamane's artwork also can't be praised enough by me. It's so stylish and of its time. The huge sharp 90s eyes, the sharp teeth, and the overall costume designs are super up my alley. Thankfully, Yamane would go on to create more manga after this, but I wish he did get to grace the pages of Jump a little bit more. In a way, you could view Jump itself like a wrestling organization. Both have a roster of fighters, so to speak. Some get pushed more than others, and some get dropped over time, though it doesn't swap out its top wrestler nearly as much. This year would see its top dog change though, and Joker was part of a batch of 3 manga alongside it, and the next manga we're going to talk about. Seikimatsu leader Takeshi would be a big hit of 1997, running for 237 chapters within Weekly Shonen Jump, amassed into 24 volumes by Mitsutoshi Shimabukuro. The general premise sees a boy be born named Takeshi who has the features of a grown man, including a cleft chin, stubble, and enhanced motor functions, allowing him to walk just after 2 days of being born. Inspired by his father's life goal of being a leader, Takeshi too wishes for just that, and the series mostly follows him helping out his classmates and being a general good guy. There's some genuine heart to it, with lessons which I think would be beneficial to kids being a constant in the early chapters. They remind me of Yakuza sub-stories in a way, like this music came on in my head when I was reading, whenever Takeshi helped out someone in need or if a story was a little bit sad. If this is all Takeshi was, my opinion of it would be pretty high, but it tends to go a bit all over the place. Primarily it is a comedy manga, so of course it has different gag elements, a lot of crude humor, poop and pee jokes, absurdist comedy, slapstick, and the general jokes that come from Takeshi looking like an adult man. More than a few other students also come across like they're older too, which does lend to it being pretty funny in a lot of cases, as these supposed children who look like adult men fight each other and do all sorts of other silly things. Alongside the gags, sometimes it'll veer into battle shonen territory too, which is a lot more apparent later on, where entire arcs revolve around fighting. This can take the form of Takeshi and friends fighting other students, adults, or just straight up monsters. The world is ultimately not very well defined and is a sandbox for whatever quirky stuff Shimabukuro can think up, with him often breaking the fourth wall with little text boxes, or him just appearing as a character within the series, even placing and winning in popularity polls in some cases. Admittedly, I didn't enjoy these parts as much, and I felt they were a lot more random, but also typical of other gag manga, like anything could create an absurd storyline like this. It shines most when it's confined to its school setting, and Takeshi can exhibit that he's a good leader by looking out for his buddies. More on elements I don't like, I also might as well mention that some of the jokes really don't track. There's the homophobic stuff you're likely to see from this era. There's one joke about a molestation train some characters have to go through as part of a little tournament. Sexual assault was brought up a few times for comedic sake early on, and sure, I don't like it, but it feels especially out of place in such a child-focused manga. And probably the worst of it is this joke where a character gets called a pedophile and says their strike zone is middle school, second grade and above, which I think is a good enough segue into Seikimatsu leader Takeshi and Mitsutoshi Shimabukuro's biggest controversy. In August of 2002, Weekly Shonen Jump combined issue of 36-37 would see the final chapter of Takeshi be published in the magazine, and this is because around the time, Mitsutoshi Shimabukuro was caught violating child prostitution laws. Shimabukuro's sentence was suspended for this, however, which gradually let him worm his way back into the manga industry and later back into Jump. Takeshi would be finished in Super Jump with extra chapters. It's again a frankly disgusting turn of events I have to bring up in regards to an author in this period, and I think the one thing that upsets me the most about this is how not much consideration is ever given for the situation of the victim. With this context, it makes reading Takeshi quite difficult for me, especially when jokes crop up regarding sexual assault or pedophiles, like way to self-report. The fact that the manga is also so geared to children and is about children also makes this much worse in my opinion. Like the case with Watsuki, I take no joy in talking about any of this, and it will be the last time I refer to it in much detail throughout this history series, but I feel like it's important information to convey, and in this instance it did lead to the direct cancellation or suspension of a work within Shonen Jump. Thankfully, after this, we can move on to something much more exciting that I'm sure many of you have been waiting for a long time. And finally, after multiple years of making these videos, and me making 24 videos in total on the magazine, we reach a currently running series within it, One Piece by Eiichiro Oda. It's honestly surreal getting to this point, now knowing the majority of manga that predated One Piece, the entire history of the magazine, how things built up and likely inspired its existence. It's also so hard to imagine a world without this series, and for the foreseeable future and for the next few years of my life, I'll be reading and talking about it regularly because it's not going away anytime soon, with it currently, as of writing, having 1,164 chapters. I think that's already wrong as of me speaking this, and will be even more wrong by the time this video is out. And so, for once, I don't have an accurate chapter or volume count. This series is ongoing. It has over 1,000 chapters and over 100 volumes. Fear not though, as today will only be covering what debuted in 1997, which includes its beginning in Romance Dawn and the majority of Orange Town, so we'll dip slightly into 1998's chapters just to keep things more digestible as I go through things arc by arc. Before we delve into the series proper though, I want to try to illustrate the lead up to One Piece, as the 90s were Oda's incubation ground. While we've been covering all this history about Shonen Jump, Oda would submit his first one-shot in 1990, Right Wanted, which would win several awards. He would then go on to do assistant work on several manga we've covered, like Sui's and Police Gang, Kappa Man, and Rurouni Kenshin. 1996 would then see two versions of Romance Dawn be published, One Piece's one-shot precursor, with one of these being published within Jump itself in 1996, and then of course, we reach issue 34 of 1997 that sees One Piece debut. There was no axed manga by Oda, it was a straight shot to One Piece, working under others as an assistant, making plenty of one-shots, and according to Oda's first editor, Takanori Asada, in a 2018 interview for TBS Radio, the series was even rejected 3 times by higher-ups before getting the go-ahead for serialization. Despite this pushback, the series came out and was an immediate hit. 11 issues after its debut, One Piece would take the cover again, with chapter 12 in 1997, and then again for issue 50 of the year, even getting lead color pages in the very next issue of Jump 2. A series is never pushed like this unless it's absurdly popular from the very beginning. So if you ever wondered, yes, One Piece was a hit from its very start. And I think from reading its very first chapter, it's easy to see why. One Piece begins on a small island, giving us a glimpse of its protagonist Luffy daydreaming about being a pirate like his idol Shanks. And through the course of the chapter, we see him eat the Gum Gum fruit, introducing us to One Piece's wacky power system that's nothing short of intriguing. The Gum Gum fruit in particular is very flexible too, not just in its actual powers, which are great for visually establishing action and comedy scenes, but through what it might represent as well. Luffy can stretch, he's malleable, there's a lot of potential in this ability which I think is reflective of the series and its main character, as well as tone. It really feels like the world is your oyster at the beginning of the series, and spoilers, even now almost 3 decades later, the manga is still surrounded by this grand sense of adventure and mystery. Romance Dawn sets up the board well. In Chapter 1 we learn about pirates, devil fruits, monstrous creatures, bounties, and the vague goal of the One Piece. Luffy also takes center stage, initially being a bratty kid, but it's through his admiration of Shanks, a figure the series makes effortlessly charismatic, that I think the readers can easily connect to him. Perhaps not on a deep level, but straight away I feel Luffy learns a lesson about standing up for others, especially for your friends, and Shanks' sacrifice and later gift of his hat make a big impression on readers too. It's such a solid first chapter because it sets up a lot of ideas for the future and makes you excited about its world while also giving you enough reason to care about its main character. Continuing on, 1997 sees Luffy inspire and help Kobe fight Alvida, and together at Shelltown, they take out the deadly Captain Morgan by rescuing the pirate hunter Roronoa Zoro. This portion of Romance Dawn builds up the world more and shows us that we won't just be fighting other pirate crews, but marines too, and more importantly, good and bad people can be found anywhere. Pirates can exhibit kindness sometimes, and on the flip side, Marines can take advantage of townsfolk through being corrupt. A nice intro to the social and political commentary One Piece will interweave throughout its story. Luffy tends to flip everything on its head in his simple pursuit towards his goal, and his straightforward innocent nature is infectious. It's quite charming when he comes up to Zoro to ask him to join his crew, even though Zoro is literally a pirate hunter. Barriers are broken through their fight against the Marines though, by their equal desire to be generally good people and the best at whatever they do, be it being a pirate or the best swordsman in the world. The chemistry between these two is a lot of fun as well, and while the duo adventure they have between them doesn't last very long, the banter they do share between Shelltown and the next arc is something I enjoyed immensely. On the subject of the next arc, Orange Town introduces us to Nami, a future crew member and thief, as well as Buggy and his crew, the first antagonist with a devil fruit power, which is pretty much the opposite of Luffy's Gum Gum fruit. Oda's creativity is on full display with these two. They aren't typical powers you'd see from most series. There's a focus on being fun visually through them, which makes the series a joy to read. The best part of this arc though is its focus on the idea of treasure, which comes in all sorts of different forms, not just the physical shiny gold variety. Shanks' straw hat is referred to as Luffy's treasure multiple times here. It's the symbol of the friendship and connection to his mentor figure, as well as it representing the promise they share together. Through this, Luffy is able to empathize with other characters in this arc. Choo Choo and Boodle, a dog and the mayor of Orange Town, who are protecting the things they themselves treasure. The focus on these two and how much they care about the town, the pet store, and the people who live there is treated in a very heartfelt way, which I think is the first major instance, aside from Chapter 1, where One Piece shows its trump card. The series' ability to instill an emotional reaction in the reader is unfathomably strong. It's able to so cleanly convey why you should care about these small minor side characters, why what they treasure matters, and then you get to see how they fight for them, and it's nothing short of liberating when Luffy beats back the people who are antagonizing them, bolstering his character in the process. This arc exhibits heart, it builds the world, and it also offers us a few classic shonen fights too, with Luffy fighting Richie and Moji, the lion tamer, and Zoro fighting Kabaji, the acrobat. Both are just solid fun. But the fight against Buggy grounds itself in the treasure theme by providing an insight into his prior meetings with Shanks. Also, Oda used Sly Dog, showing us characters we won't see until like a decade from now. One Piece loves to do this, by the way. It will hide little details that will become relevant years and years in the future. Comedy is also at the forefront of this fight with Buggy, which makes sense since he is a clown, but this goes for all of One Piece really. Its ability to juggle serious heartfelt moments with its comedy is a feat that it should be acknowledged for. After reading these 20 odd chapters, I ended up feeling content emotionally, but also happy due to laughing at all of its jokes. I'm so glad I'm reading One Piece again, and we have so much more of this to come in future videos. We're not quite done though, as there's a lot to bring up when it comes to supplemental media outside of the One Piece manga. It's ballooned into several other avenues, like a still ongoing anime that debuted in 1999, a live action TV show awaiting its second season, a second supposed anime, tons of films, games, merch, trading cards. It's also gradually on its way to becoming the most sold comic in the world, becoming synonymous with its own medium. It's what you think of when manga is brought up, and especially when you think Shonen Jump, you're likely to think One Piece or of Luffy's face. Luffy and One Piece at this point are the poster boy of the magazine and have been for a good long while. Honestly, it feels like fate when you consider that for the longest time, Jump's logo has been a pirate. Of course, one of its biggest series ever would be about pirates too. Before we wrap up though, we actually have quite a bit more to discuss adjacent to One Piece. I thought it would be interesting to look at the issue One Piece actually debuted in, since I do have a replica copy. This is one reprinted for the magazine's 50th anniversary a few years back, and I apologize in advance for my likely poor filming, because I'm not very good at this and I'm only using my little phone camera, but I'll try to capture some cool features about this issue, and my hope is it might help ground you in the magazine at the time, since I'm sure many people want to know exactly what the magazine was like when One Piece started. So opening it up, you actually have this fold-out poster for Eyes featuring Iori, like she's an actual idol, something I find a bit interesting since I think Jump's contemporaries would do similar things but for real idols. It's a fun relic of the past where ecchi manga still had a bunch of sway. We then have chapter 1 of One Piece with a few pages in colour. The spread in particular looks great in real life. After this, we actually have some adverts too, showing off some of the coolest new stuff you could pick up in 1997 in Japan, like the PlayStation 1, the Panasonic Shockwave, and this CD player. The next few pages also showcase an ad for Morinaga Haichu, and then the PS1 again with Everybody's Golf. One thing you may notice about the next few pages of One Piece 2 are it's printed in this bichrome format, with a bunch of tone brought out to this orange ink. If you've ever bought the physical version of JoJo, you'll notice it there too. This is something the magazine used to do to give some series a bit of a boost in quality. It's especially noticeable when a series gets to debut, gets lead color pages, or color pages generally, I think. Though shortly after this, I think it was mostly discontinued in 1998 and relegated to being used in bonus pages or advertisements after that. And before I forget about it, we also have the Shonen Jump questionnaire, something you're meant to fill out and send back to Shueisha, detailing how you feel about the issue, including a section where you list your 3 favorite series of any given week. These surveys are apparently a major force in letting editorial decide what goes and stays, and it's a statistic we're not privy to my knowledge, so many people don't tend to talk about them much. In between manga, you'll also get a variety of pages, adverts, probably interviews of fun things with different authors, which I unfortunately don't know much about since I can't read Japanese. This Digimon page did catch my eye though, which would coincide with the original release of Digimon, the Virtual Pets, since they debuted in June of 1997 as well. It's a shame we never got a Digimon manga in Jump, though I guess we did get Yu-Gi-Oh! For where other manga were at the time, Rurouni Kenshin would hit chapter 155 in the very early stages of the Jinchu arc. JoJo has this great color page featuring Giorno and Mister, one of the few color pages of part 5's run. On the reverse, there's an advert for some 1-point lessons painted yourself JoJo miniatures, which don't look great to be honest, but might be a fun project. The chapter itself showcases some of the later fight against Gachao and White Album 2, which is one of my favourite fights of the part. Next, there's this double-page spread showing us all the one-shots from the 1997 Shonen Jump Readers' Cup one-shot competition, which I'll talk about a bit later in this video. We also have chapter 2 of Takeshi, which I did enjoy. I think it's one of the better chapters of the series, which I did read. Chapter 52 of Hoshin Engi is here too, where we're about a quarter of the way through the entire series. The 3rd chapter of Joker is here, and it looks super cool. Eyes is in its early chapters. Kochikame is here too, advertising some toys. And this chapter seems pretty chill honestly, it looks like Ryotsu is going on a bit of a break or something. Wild Half is at its halfway point at this point, with this cute little dog boy. Hallelujah 2 Boy is in this edgy biker arc, which feels very out of place within the magazine, especially flicking through it here. Hell Teacher Nube feels especially Hideshi Hino inspired this week. There's some fun Tetris-y looking stuff going on too. Tenten has a baseball chapter, and then is that my goat Hiroshi Motomiya with a Salaryman Kintaro game advertisement? Yeah, I'm still not shutting up about the grandpappy of the magazine. I'm really glad he keeps popping up now and again. There's an ad for sunscreen here too, I think. Pretty random, but I guess kids do need to put on sunscreen, that's a good idea. Midori is in some of its later chapters, and it's cool to see the art here as it's so much more detailed and action focused than the beginning. Do I even want to know what's happening in Makuhari? Probably not. Yu-Gi-Oh! On the other hand is the chapter where Joey goes on a TV game show. This is one I remember seeing when I was much younger and thought it was weird they weren't playing Duel Monsters at the time, so fond memories for me there. The rest of the mag is then series by authors who wouldn't really return. After these series would end, Majoko Vivian, Majima, Wrestling with Momoko, and then finally we close out the magazine with Captain Tsubasa World Youth, which is actually wrapping up its final match as it would end in just 3 more chapters. I'm sure there's some cool other stuff I've glossed over or missed here and there. It's really nice flicking through these old issues of Jump though. There's something special about holding the magazine in your hands and seeing where each of the manga are physically slotted in. I really hope you got something out of this little section, and I'm sure someone somewhere on YouTube has a video going through the full thing in nicer quality than I have. If I have time, I'll try to find a video and link it in the description somewhere. But yep, that was the magazine and what it was like when One Piece debuted. It would be really cool if I did this before, honestly, or if I could do this for every single video, having at least one Jump issue to show off, but for now this will be a little treat to celebrate such a monumental manga debuting. I hope you look forward to more One Piece though, as we'll return to it in the next video when we cover Shonen Jump in 1998 and the Syrup Village arc. For now though, we have a few more new debuts that came out in this year to look at. Cool Rental Bodyguard would last 19 chapters and 3 volumes by Takeshi Konomi and would be a bit of a battle manga with a bodyguard focus as the title suggests, something that's become a bit of its own subgenre over time. In Cool, people can hire bodyguards such as the ones at Coffee Shop Jam, and they come in various varieties like power or speed types, but one of those types is called the Tricky type. These are oddball bodyguards but come at a reduced cost. Cool is one of these bodyguards, who is someone who only talks through pre-recorded lines using a tape recorder, though he shouts his signature catchphrase, "Cool," whenever he's about to do something cool, presumably. He also has the absurd ability to predict anything, like what anyone he meets says, hence the tape recorder. But this makes him great in fights too, as he can guess exactly what his foes will do. While this series wasn't long lasting, it would eventually get a spin-off lasting 2 volumes called Lady Cool, a luxury the author could afford as Takeshi Konomi is an author we'll see again very soon, being the creator of Prince of Tennis. Kirin the Last Unicorn would last 20 chapters and 3 volumes by Ken Yagami, and it would follow Kirin Indo, a middle schooler who has been sickly since birth. But due to ingesting a unicorn horn through powder, it's made him healthy enough to live his life day by day. Years later, he's then visited by a so-called unicorn missing his corn named Comet, and when the two of them come together, it activates their latent unicorn powers. Thus, the two get involved in all sorts of adventures involving their powers and others who are also anthropomorphic mythical beasts. The manga initially juggled drama as its main element with some ecchi and gag on the side, but as it progressed, much like Yagami's other Jump series, Hisoka Returns, it melded in battle elements too, with the different mythical beasts. While this seemed better constructed for battle, it seemed Kirin bounced around too much with its developments and it wasn't able to hold an audience for long, leading to its cancellation. For something a bit different, Bastard would actually return this year after being relegated to Jump's seasonal special issues since the late 80s. Its return would see it be serialized sporadically for the remainder of the decade, with it even getting a cover in 1997, though come the turn of the millennium it would move to Ultra Jump after it had been established. If you'd like to know more about Bastard, I'd recommend going back to the 1988 video or just reading the manga since it's very good. Still, I thought I'd bring it up this development as it's one of the few neat little things that happened within the year. After COWA, the final manga to debut in 1997 would be Meiryotei Goto Seijuro, lasting 95 chapters and 10 volumes by Hajime Kazu. This is an odd one, following the student council president of Meiryotei High School, a massive complex of 12 buildings housing over 5,000 students, where the student council rules above all, including teachers. Seijuro Goto is the president, often nicknamed the Emperor due to his power over the school, and he lords over it violently, which the manga doesn't shy away from. Seijuro is an interesting character. He's intelligent, domineering, but brash, always involving himself in fights, and on the surface, from what I've seen, his violence seems excessive. He comes across as a villain, but deep down he does care about the students and the school. It just takes someone strong to lord over so many students. Someone has to keep everything moving smoothly. Perhaps the idea is that someone has to be the villain. It featured the general goings-on of the school, bullying, different groups fighting, and it even had its own 4 Heavenly Kings, and Seijuro would often challenge them as well as students in the student council to complete impossible tasks for his amusement. There's a grittiness to Meiryotei Goto Seijuro. Hajime Kazu's art adds to this as well. Something about it feels very frigid. It's the way his characters have piercing eyes, his line work is sharp, and his designs are angular. This coupled with the main character make this come across as something a lot harsher than I'd expect from Jump. It had to have clicked though, since it remained in the magazine for some time. The rest of the decade pretty much, with it achieving a certain cult classic status in Japan. To finish off the year, let's head back to Italy, where we last left off with Giorno and Co grabbing a certain key left by the boss so they can continue on their journey with guarding his daughter Trish. This involves them taking the train to Venice and hiding inside a turtle with a stand ability of its own. This doesn't prove to be a foolproof plan though, as the group is waylaid by Prosciutto and Pesci, who instigate one of Part 5's most exciting arcs. It helped I actually read through all of this while on a train myself this time, but the close quarters and time constraints placed on everyone to fight off the Grateful Dead's aging ability is full of excellent tension. The arc really has a bit of everything Araki is known for, and it's brimming with his individualistic flair. There's plenty of gore and horror elements with everyone aging rapidly, and Pesci's Beach Boy might elicit some kind of cringe as its fish hook worms its way inside people's skin. The very concept of a train being attacked by someone who is rapidly aging other people and another with a magic fishing rod is also very funny, but Araki approaches it with all the seriousness in the world. The portion where Bucciarati is fighting Prosciutto from the outside of the train in particular is a great action set piece that takes full advantage of the moving train, and it leads to some fantastic spreads. Bruno zipping through walls and even zipping up his own body and heart to get away from Pesci is a great showcase of his resolve and powers too. All in all, it's a fantastic way to kick off 1997. The execution squad continues to hound Passione with Babyface, perhaps one of the weirdest stands of the part that gives birth to a secondary stand based on whatever DNA Malone its user feeds into it. I find this one to be one of the weaker arcs because the stand powers are a bit all over the place, but the concept of the stand taps into fears of bodily autonomy, which I think might be fitting in regards to Trish's character somewhat, who is starting to get more and more focused on her. The following arc I feel conveys the thrill of being chased way better, which sees Mr. and Giorno paired up driving down the highway while being chased by Gachao inside his Stand White album. He's one of the part's more beloved villains because of his tirades that he goes on about pronunciation and such, but his stand is also extremely cool, no pun intended. Acting as more of a suit that lets him exude low temperatures that really test what our boys are capable of. The raw last-ditch attempt to defeat him is really felt here. It's so gritty and tense. Much of part 5 feels scrappy and bloody, especially when we get closer and closer to the boss, and I think Araki sells how difficult and tiring being pursued is throughout the arcs of 1997. After this, we finally reach the island of San Giorgio Maggiore, where the crew dock, and we then have Clash and Talking Head, which present us with a bit more comedy, since JoJo always has to balance its darker elements with some bizarreness. It's the same as it ever was, really. The iconic scene where the gang beat up some random normal guy is here in this arc, which is great. I want to highlight it in particular. Maybe I'm a twisted individual, but random explosive acts of violence sometimes are really funny to me. The focus of this arc, though, is ultimately on Narancia, who gets infected by Talking Head, leading him to say and do the opposite of what he intends to do, and hilarity ensues. Him pointing around at nothing, accidentally lying, and telling everyone to look at him pissing will never fail to be funny to me. It's also great seeing Narancia figure out how to defeat his enemy, mostly on his own, who in this arc are the totally not gay but just close friends pair of Squallow and Tiziano. Their stands feel like such a step down power-wise compared to some of the more recent ones the gang's faced, but I'm glad we had an arc with them that added a bit of levity to end the year with. Okay, going back a bit, I wanted to save this for last and also mess around with King Crimson's ability a bit through video editing. We're going to cover the major story reveals of the part now. So, we're back at the island of San Giorgio Maggiore, where the crew dock, and this is the turning point for part 5 in a number of ways. So far, it's been a pretty nebulous track to find the boss and defeat him, though mixed in with that, we've been on this Trish escort mission, which ends here. The boss tells Bucciarati to bring Trish and him alone into the church while everyone else stays on the boat. I think this is the best time to bring this up, but the structure of part 5 and the motivations of its cast haven't been the most gripping. Perhaps because we just haven't spent enough time with Giorno or the crew, and because their motivations are largely secret from one another. This does end up increasing the levels of drama on display, which this arc highlights quite well in a certain scene we'll get to, but beyond that, Giorno and Bruno just haven't connected enough, I feel, and it leaves this part of the story, in particular, feeling a bit loose. That isn't to say this arc is bad though, as I think this is the turning point where things get really good. Once Bruno enters the cathedral, we get an amazing moment with Trish where she's scared. She's scared at having her entire life upturned, at developing and seeing these stands, at being followed by all of these random men/teens, and at meeting the man who is supposedly her father, someone she doesn't know nor trust. I wish we spent a bit more time with her prior to this, since fostering empathy is a bit difficult, especially when you've had limited time with a character, but it does hit really hard when the next moment she's talking and then suddenly she's gone, and all Bruno is holding on to is her severed hand. This year sees a few characters get some backstory, but Bruno sticks out to me the most, being present in this arc. You see him experience divorce as a child and ultimately decides he wants to stay with his father figure because he understands that he is the one who will be hurt most by this process. Bruno, even at a young age, exhibits a mature and nurturing side. He wants to help. He wants to do what's best for those in need. We then get to see this time and time again through him adopting the various characters into his gang. Really, he is the heart of Golden Wind. I think he's the most obvious example of some of its potential themes. Bruno represents heavily the want or even choice to be good and dignified in a dark world. And not just through himself upholding some kind of morals, but by uplifting others too. In contrast, the boss who we meet in this arc is the opposite. Sinking into the shadows, he embraces crime, takes the easy answers to problems, and does everything in his power to keep his station, even at the cost of others, like his own daughter. His stand, King Crimson, is also terrifying. I think this initial sighting of it in the Chapel Undercroft is one of the most evocative and tense moments across the entire JoJo series. Its user and stand hide in the shadows, behind pillars, and when you think Bruno might have the upper hand and has found him, there's no one there. King Crimson obliterates time, forcing others to jump ahead while they skulk around in its recesses, which allows it to set up devastating counterattacks like the one that leads to Bruno getting his chest caved in. Bruno seemingly dies here, a point the series will touch on again throughout, though true to his nature he gets back up, ready to lead his crew, and the boss gets away, though they do manage to save Trish. This encounter prompts a dramatic change within the story. The boss is now firmly our goal. Bruno and Giorno want to take over Passione to eliminate the drugs being peddled around, to create a more idealistic cabal that would look out for the citizens of Italy instead of taking advantage of them. They want to challenge the fates they've been dealt, to overcome the strife of their childhoods, to make the world a better place. Bruno denounces the boss here and tells his crew that they're free to do as they please. They can walk away, abandon Bruno, or side with him, but he will not order them to do so. They must choose themselves what path they will take. But seeing as Bruno has saved them all in the past, most are eager to join. Abakio, without much hesitation, joins, feeling as though he's already an outcast. Mr. hops on too under the promise of riches and power, though likely a front as he trusts both Bruno and Giorno. Narancia remains undecided and terrified, though reaches an epiphany. He comes to empathize with Trish and her being abandoned. The wound on her wrist is my wound, he says as he swims after the boat. I love the solidarity he shows in this moment, and this entire scene might be one of my favorites in the series because it really brings the part, its characters and themes together. It makes them feel close and bonded, though there is an outlier to all of this. Panacotta Fugo does not join the rest of the cast, and after this doesn't really show up for the rest of the story. 1997 is where he gets off, leaving him a dead end. Fugo is an interesting character since he's an artifact of weekly manga serialization, of a story being created, written and changed over a long period of time. You'll often hear people echo the sentiment that Fugo was initially planned to betray the crew, but this idea was cut because Araki was too upset to go ahead with this plotline. I'll link some commentary by Araki from the Golden Wind Bunkerman release in the description if you'd like to read exactly what he has said. In his commentary, it's clear how much this part means to him and that Araki was struggling at the time with several things. The willpower to go along with this plotline was one thing, but also he does bring up censorship, be it through himself or through editorial, though he politely skirts around specifics. It does come across though that the series was supposed to be a bit darker, and in the haste to get chapters out in time, the pushback wasn't made by Araki to keep his vision fully intact. Though it also seems like that vision was something he struggled with anyway. Since we're talking about the history of Jump, I think considering the series in a magazine context makes this discussion on Part 5 and Fugo a lot more interesting. It's not simply an unwillingness to tell a dark story. There's barriers there, perhaps put up by Araki or editorial, not wanting the cast to kill a former friend. Something that would be very un-Jump-like, or the magazine gradually swerving to being a bit more child-friendly could have played a part, especially with bigger hits like Yu-Gi-Oh!, One Piece and Takeshi being so focused on in this time period. To play devil's advocate to my point though, Hallelujah 2 Boy was running at this time, and in its debut video I did remark how absurdly dark that series ended up getting, especially at this point in time. Plus you have series like Ayatsuri Sakon from a few years prior, which was quite the dark push for a detective series, filled with some pretty scary horror artwork. Things aren't so cut and dry, and I don't want to come across as if I'm blaming editorial or saying with full certainty that they censored Part 5, but reading Araki's comment, the decision surrounding Fugo sounds like it wasn't made lightly. All of this compounds and resulted in this bizarre loose end. Thankfully though, if you're willing to step outside the manga, Fugo's story doesn't end quite here. This also means stepping outside the bounds of Weekly Shonen Jump as a magazine, but as part of this reread, I did read through all of the novel Purple Haze feedback, Kohei Kadono's shot at showing us what happened beyond Part 5 with a focus on Fugo. I bring this up despite its magazine connections because it's such an enlightening and enjoyable read that for me at least fills the gaps and retrospectively makes the entire series better. It zones in on Fugo's inability to act during this moment in Part 5 at the church and shows other characters who also remain stagnant. I like how it shows that some people move at different speeds, some grapple with things differently, and often that leaves them feeling left behind or guilty. Fugo eventually through this novel gets a similar arc to his contemporaries, and it's nothing short of excellent. It had been fan translated for the longest time, initially coming out in Japanese in 2011, though an official physical English release is slated for early 2026 too, entitled Purple Smoke Distortion. I think it's also appropriate to mention that there's another Fugo-centric light novel that predates this too, being Golden Heart, Golden Ring, though I haven't read it, and it's not discussed with the same level of reverence that Purple Haze Feedback ever is. Again, I highly recommend checking out Purple Haze Feedback if you feel disappointed in how Fugo left the gang partway through the series. It's a really good little book. On the subject of JoJo side media, we aren't quite done, as 1997 would see Jump hold another one-shot initiative named the Shonen Jump Readers' Cup 1997. This is actually a throwback to something we would have seen decades ago, the Aidoku Sasho that ran from 1973 to 1983. I might have mentioned it once or twice in older videos very briefly. This would see various authors from within the magazine draw one-shots, and among these was Araki, resulting in Thus Spoke Kishibe Rohan Episode 16 at a Confessional. Interestingly, for this competition, authors weren't meant to create a spin-off of a previous work, though Araki found a bizarre workaround through setting Rohan up as a narrator without him being directly involved. Apparently this was okayed by a tutorial, and of course this would set up an entire spin-off series featuring Rohan, which Araki adds to now and again, even to this day, which is pretty ironic considering the initial ideas of this competition. Despite my love for JoJo, I actually have never read any of the Rohan spin-offs aside from his Louvre adventure, so it was very interesting to read At a Confessional for the first time. Its approach of being closer in tone to a horror anthology short was welcome, giving me memories of Outer Zone, which we covered earlier on in the 90s. It's creepy and as bizarre as JoJo usually is, though I did find it a tad confusing towards the end, perhaps due to it being constrained to a certain number of pages, plus a deadline. 3 more Thus Spoke Kishibe Rohan chapters would be serialized within Weekly Shonen Jump itself, much later down the line in 2012, 2013, and 2018. At a Confessional has since been animated by David Production 2 and has a live-action film adaptation. JoJo remains ever popular even in this spin-off form, and it's interesting that all of this came about through Shonen Jump reviving an old one-shot contest from the past. The 1997 Jump Readers' Cup also had a standalone release too, featuring all 10 one-shots bundled into a single issue, which I think is pretty neat. Though currently I think the only ones available to read in English are At a Confessional, Ryuji Fujisaki's Yugamism as part of his Dramatic Irony one-shot collection, and Booble of Demon Village by Akira Toriyama. Notable among these one-shots is also Romances by Yuko Asami, which we'll see again one day in the 1999 history video as it became a full-on series there. Perhaps this whole event is worth looking into sometime to see what all the authors came up with, as it's quite interesting and worth covering on its own merits, I think. Now that we've run through everything new in 1997, let's reevaluate the magazine at the beginning and end of the year to see how things changed. I think the year saw it evolve considerably. We're still technically in a bit of a lull after Jump's fall in 1995, but this year saw the magazine piece itself back together in some major ways. To start out the year, we have some current heavy hitters in Hoshinengi, Yu-Gi-Oh! And Rurouni Kenshin, Midori Makibao, Helde Tsunube, and the old guard still going strong with Kojikame, Roku Tanashi Blues, JoJo, and Hallelujah 2 Boy. For gag manga, we also have Sexy Commando, Makuhari and Lucky Man. Majima and Wild Half would act as other solid long runners, as would Captain Tsubasa World Youth Force Sports. Level E would also serialize intermittently throughout the year too. We're then left with Majoko Vivian, which lasted a decent while, and then B Takuto as well as Kusanagi Ayoi for some current duds. Throughout the year, B Takuto, Kusanagi Ayoi and Vivian would end, but also so would a number of large bigger hits. Level E would end its short but spread out run this year. Sexy Commando, Makuhari, and Lucky Man would end in 1997, seeing Jump lose the majority of its gag series all at once. And to top it all off, Captain Tsubasa and the super long-running boxing delinquent series Roku Danashi Blues would come to a close after over 400 chapters. This left a lot of room to be filled in 1997, especially for any gag or sports series, but of course, the biggest thing to debut would be neither. One Piece, an adventure-centered manga, would join the magazine and become its frontrunner almost immediately, which of course it still is to this day in late 2025. It's surreal that I finally get to include it in the roster section and get used to it too, because like Kochikame, it's going to be around for a long time. Bastard would take the spot of Level E, being a bit of a special case, only being serialized on occasion. For gag series, Seikimatsu leader Den Takeshi and Tenten would be welcome new additions that would last a considerable amount of time. Ice would finally bring a romance ecchi work back to the magazine and act as another considerable hit. COWA would see Toriyama return briefly for some spooky fun, and Meiryotei Goto Seijuro would be an interesting curveball work that would stick around for a couple of years. This leaves the only real duds of 1997 to be Cool Rental Bodyguard and Kirin the Last Unicorn. This overall was a year of big series ending, yet the magazine might be better off based on its new debuts. Even if it was just One Piece debuting, I probably would have said this, but there's a handful of other successful manga that dropped this year too, but there's only really missing some sports series representation. There's still room for some improvement, and COWA being a short series wouldn't last forever, so let's see if 1998 can continue this upward trend for Jump. And a slight spoiler, 1998 is a really fun year full of some insane debuts, and I look forward to covering it. So if you enjoyed this video, please stick around, subscribe, as I will be covering it sooner rather than later. As a disclaimer though, it might take me a while to get that video out, as there is a lot of big manga that debuted in that video and there's a lot of things I need to read. If this is your first video from me and you aren't aware, I have a whole series of videos going over every single year of Weekly Shonen Jump's history going back to 1968, the year Jump was first published, though those videos are a bit old so don't expect them to be quite as robust as this one. If newer manga are more your thing though, I have plenty of newer videos on Weekly Shonen Jump's cancelled manga as well. There's a recent trio of videos on 3 pretty popular cancelled works which I put my all into that I'd recommend checking out. This includes videos on Mama Yuyu, Ayashimon, and Green Greens. As always, I also want to give a huge thank you to my Patreons who have helped make this video and others possible through their support. If I didn't have the Patreon, I think I would still do my best to make these videos, but thanks to all the help, I can talk about all kinds of manga and devote more time into videos, which helps alleviate stress and lets me make these more frequently. If you'd like to join, you can for as little as $1 a month, and patrons get the occasional bonus video, access to polls, and their names read out in the credits of all my videos. Anybody in the $3 tier or above also gets a little personalized doodle drawn by me to represent them in the credits too, like the following cool people. Thank you: Trinity, Jade, Kazuku Kaeru, Soroko Zero, Holly the Apothecary, Mayu, It's Faco, Yellowtail, Lay Sloggett, Chris P. Bacon, Chohenshin, Full Metal, Unquestionable, Yuzakura Psycho, Wurzel, Violent, Cactus, Joni, City Name E, Vina Burrito, Caffeine Dad, Cryonaut, Crash, 41IZ, Hong, Jamie Reynolds, Manu, Pokeemblem, James Miller, Jopa Monkey, Just a Virus, Star Sphinx, PK Broly, Fenrir Black, Elijah Espinoza, Neo Humanoid, Mark Nielsen, Electro Pirate, Jay Vasso, 3 Frogs in a Trench Coat, Sir Flash, Gay Shark, Slimy Okra, Gidista, TG Talks Manga, Wavy Sky, John Jerry 722, Andrew, Zenomat, Miskell, Tara Elizabeth, Stratomega 13, Dennis Tambik, Jubei, Lise, Hilltop, Vakudraws, Otaku Gamer X, Deadpan, Shy Monkeys, Jonathan Dragonet, John Sanford, Color, Jaime, Strawberry Proshone, Vaz, Palette, Ruina, Juice, Kurumi Knox, Eric Gorski, Miss the Shira, Grizz Exploder, Dextora, Eni Oshowo, Cheese, Emmy, Benjamin, Tenmaku Lover, and Taifumi Studios. Thank you all so much for being patrons, and as always, thank you so much for watching. Remember to be kind, and take care.